Hi, my name's Don Feeney. I am a Dakota County Master Gardener. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about tomatoes, specifically the 6 different varieties of tomatoes that we have planted this year for comparison's sake. Now, these 6 varieties are all for some reason called easy to grow tomatoes. I have no idea why. I have been growing tomatoes for 40 years approximately, and during that time I have grown probably about 100 different varieties of tomatoes. I have never found that one variety is easier to grow than another. So I'm not sure what the selection committee was getting at with those, but it's still 6 interesting varieties to try. They're all red tomatoes. As you know, tomatoes can ripen in many different colors, but these are all reds. Most of these tomatoes are what we call determinate tomatoes. Tomatoes come in 2 basic types, determinate and indeterminate. The difference is that an indeterminate tomato, which is the original form of the tomato, will continue to grow through the growing season and will set fruit, smaller amounts of fruit, continuously over that period of time, so that they will have a long season. The determinate tomatoes are shorter, and they tend to set all of their fruit pretty much at once. The reason for that is they were developed by and for commercial growers who want to go through and harvest a field all basically at the same time. They don't want to have to keep coming in and picking a few tomatoes off the same plants week after week. A lot of times you will see determinate tomatoes sold for pot use because they are smaller. However, the price you pay then is you will have a lot of tomatoes at one time and then nothing for the rest of the season, for the most part. There are some determinate tomatoes that do have a longer growing season than others. And you can see the difference here. This tomato here, which is a tomato called Oregon Spring, short, lots and lots of fruit on it. Over here, we have one of our indeterminate tomatoes. This is an Italian heirloom tomato called Castelluto Genovese. Very tall and will continue. You see fruits, if you look through that, you see fruits in different stages of maturity, from ripe to higher up the plant, just starting to develop. And this is, of the 6, also the only heirloom tomato we have. All of the others are hybrids. Now, supposedly, one of the advantages of hybrid tomatoes is that they are disease resistant, more disease resistant than the heirlooms. That's not necessarily true. I mean, the heirlooms would not have lasted as long as they did if they did not have resistance to diseases. However, getting certified as disease resistant is an expensive process, and an heirloom, which is something that anybody can save seed and grow seed from, the commercial seed producers have no particular interest in spending the money to have them certified as disease resistant on it. Now, several years ago, I saw a column by a local garden writer who should have known better, saying, you want to buy tomatoes with lots and lots of letters after their names for the disease resistance. And the letters will be things like V, F, A, N. The problem is that most of the disease resistance has been developed for the heavy commercial tomato growing areas, Florida, California, some areas along the East Coast like New Jersey. They don't have the same diseases that we do. And so most of that disease resistance and those letters after those names are going to do you almost no good whatsoever if you're growing tomatoes in Minnesota. So my advice would be to ignore those and not worry about it. The disease that we have that is most common by far in Minnesota is a disease called early blight. And that makes the tomatoes' leaves look like this. It's a fungal disease. It is overwinters in the soil, and it develops on a plant when water hits the soil, rain hits the soil, it splashes up, and the fungus is conveyed to the leaves. It'll start at the bottom of the plant and then continue to develop as the plant grows over the season up. It will not hurt the tomatoes, particularly for the early yield. However, it will cut the yield period of your tomatoes short. There's not a lot you can do about it. There are fungicides that are sort of mildly effective, but you have to be careful to spray the undersides of the leaves, and it's a very difficult process. Probably the best thing you can do is, as you start to see leaves turn yellow on the bottom of the plant, prune those off. Don't put them in your compost pile. It probably doesn't get hot enough to kill it. Dispose of them in some other way. You'll hear advice, don't sprinkle from overhead because that will splash the water up. That's true, but so does rain. So it is largely unavoidable. You can work on it. As I said, the pruning up the plant, and I've seen plants that are pretty much naked on their bottom half from that pruning, and that does help somewhat. But it's kind of a fact of life in Minnesota. There are very, very few tomato plants varieties that show any resistance to early blight. So it's just something that we're going to have to live with. As I mentioned, all these tomatoes are red. We have here Wisconsin 55. They tend to be the older hybrids. This is starting to ripen, get a nice round red fruit. We haven't had a chance to taste it yet, so I don't know how well that's going to do. But it seems to be holding up to blight fairly well. Less blight on the Wisconsin 55 than we're seeing on some of the others. This one, which was our first to develop any blight, is Oregon Spring, developed, as the name suggests, at the University of Oregon. It was developed specifically to grow in cooler weather than most tomatoes do, which was important in Oregon, but it's nice insurance if we happen to have a cool season here. And as I said, it's setting lots of fruit at this one time. Very nice looking fruit. I've tried this one before. It's a pretty tasty tomato. Here, as I mentioned, is our one heirloom tomato. It's an Italian heirloom. Castelluto Genovese has this beautiful ribbed structure to it. It tends to have nice cavities in it and not a lot of seeds, so it's a good tomato if you like to do stuffed tomatoes. This is a good one. This is a good one to do, and it can make a pretty decent tomato sauce out of it. Again, when I've tried this, I didn't think it was a great tomato for slicing or putting in salads. The next one we have, if I can remember what it was. This is a tomato called Homestead, developed in Florida. It's not ripening here yet. I think it maybe needs a little more heat, a bit of a longer season. Some susceptibility to blight, but not overwhelmingly so. Not nearly so much as compared to the Oregon Spring, or for that matter, the Castelluto Genovese. This is a new tomato to me. We don't know how well it's going to go. We shall see. Here we have a tomato called Rutgers, one of the earliest hybrid tomatoes, one of the very, very first to be purposely bred for various characteristics. It was developed, as the name suggests, from Rutgers University in New Jersey as a somewhat more disease-resistant tomato for the truck farmers in New Jersey. It's been around a very long time, bred in the 1920s, again, how it will taste when it ripens, we will see. It's a ways from ripening yet. And then finally we have Celebrity, which is probably the newest variety, in fact definitely the newest variety of the 6 tomatoes that we're growing here. A determinate plant. This is one of them where you'll see lots of letters after the name, and it is a pretty good tomato. Seems to do well in this climate. Even though it's not really bred for early blight resistance, our plants here are not showing much early blight. That may just be a question of distance between the plants or dumb luck. We don't know yet. And that's something why these trials are being conducted all over the state. We'll see cumulatively if that was indeed the case. As I mentioned, it's a pretty good tasting red tomato. One that is of the 6. This is the one that is most widely available in garden centers if you're buying your plants there in the spring, and it's one that, from my experience, I will give a thumbs up and recommend as a good one to put in your garden.